Hello, I'm Richard Saggett and I'm not the Bald Explorer. But I am part of the Bald Explorer senior management team, and as part of the senior management team we support Richard and his videos. But we thought it'd be a good idea to ask Richard a few questions about the Bald Explorer and what goes on behind the scenes. So my first question for you, Richard, is what is your inspiration behind the Bald Explorer? Where did it originate from and how did it grow into what it's become now?
Oh, so you're all going to ask me questions. Fair enough. So what was your question? Oh yes, what was the influence for the Bald Explorer? Well, that's a very interesting question because I'd been making children's television for a long time and pitching ideas to TV companies, and I'd had the success of my Snug and Cozy children's series, which was Laurel and Hardy in spacesuits, a comedy slapstick thing on children's ITV in 1996 and 1997, and that had been reasonably successful, but for reasons which are too long and complicated to go into, we didn't get our third series, and it was nothing to do with us. There was political shenanigans going on in ITV, and I thought, after pitching a number of programs, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to further the career that was very embryonic at that time? And I thought, I know, I'll try and make stuff myself, because I was having no luck pitching ideas to the TV people, and YouTube was the thing that people were doing things in their bedroom. Spotty kids were talking about adolescence and were being very successful, and I thought, well, I'm not an adolescent, and luckily I don't have too many spots, but what I could do is perhaps film something that was free and easy to do, and that was the landscape, going around places. So I think I started to become more interested in history and more interested in the English landscape, and so I figured that I could just rock up with a camera, film some stuff, work out a bit of history about it, and present it and see if it worked, if other people would be interested. And fortunately for me, it does seem that people seem to also have those same views. So I think the influence really was being able to make something yourself and not rely on the big television executives who would tell you whether you were good enough or not, or indeed to push you into a sort of slot that perhaps you didn't want to do. So I think that's really what my influences were.
Which place in the country would you like to go to that you've not been to before? There must be somewhere that's on your bucket list for somewhere in the UK.
Oh, that's a good question, Matthew, thanks. There are so many places, aren't there, that one would like to go that we've never been before. Now, I'm not really somebody of a globe trotter. I'm interested in other places overseas, but my fascination is with this island that we're on. And obviously I've got my quest for England at the moment, and I'm particularly interested in trying to understand what England is and Englishness and how it's changed over history and what it means to me. It's a personal journey. But there are many places, not just in England, I would like to go. For example, there's wonderful places in Scotland. I've been to Scotland, but there's so much to see in some of the big mountainous regions and paths and all of that. Wales, of course, there's many more places in Wales that I'd like to explore in greater detail. And I'd love to go over to Ireland and Southern Ireland. That's supposed to be particularly beautiful and very lovely. But I think for me, in the immediate future, the Yorkshire Dales is a place that I would love to explore. All those dry stone walls, all those lovely farms, that James Herriot country. For me, I think that would be one of the places I would love to go. And of course, then there's Northumberland, which is nearby, which again is great walking country and very different from down here in the south. I think we're so lucky in England, and all of this in the UK really, that the geology changes the features, the topography of the landscape so very much within a short space of area, and I think that's why I love just exploring. So yeah, I think the Yorkshire Dales is the answer to that particular question.
Can you remind us when and how you first met the lovely Julia, and what led up to you co-presenting together?
How did I meet the lovely Julia, eh? It's funny because I think a lot of people wonder how that is and how that came about. And I also think that people think that we've been friends for a long, long time. And actually, the truth is, we've only been friends now for, a couple of years, really? Long-term viewers of the channel will kind of know how we met up, actually, because in the beginning, about 3-4 months into doing the short format 10-minute walks that the Bald Explorer started out with, not the longer format documentaries that I did, over several years, but in 2017, when I started the channel, I was doing these 10 minutes walks. I often went walking with a chap called Martin Snow, and most of them, of course, I did on my own. And then I was very keen to get people to come with me. So it wasn't just me on the screen, that there would be other people. And it was very difficult because people at that stage, they didn't know really what my setup was and how the videos worked, and were a bit worried and a bit shy. And so very few people did come forward. But one person who came forward was Julia, out of the blue, and said, I know a tree called the fairy tree. Would you like to go and have a look at it? And she told me where it was. And I said, well, yeah, but would you come and show me? And I didn't know at that point that we were going to, develop a great friendship or anything like that. And we went and filmed the fairy tree. And I thought, Julia's a bit quirky. She's got purple hair. She's got this sort of idea about fairies, and she likes trees. And she was, as I asked her, a bit of a tree hugger. And so I just thought, though, but she's a woman and I'm a man, and I'd been working with Martin Snow, as I said. It would be nice to perhaps have a more a female persona on to balance it up. And I didn't think that we would carry on presenting many of them, but we went to Kingly Vale as a second video, and Julia just showed certain qualities that I thought were really fresh and new. And so I just kept asking her if she wanted to do more, and our friendship developed. We got chatting in the car to places, and she came up with ideas, and we went to Glastonbury. And that was quite a big moment for us, because we realised that we could have a friendship and a working relationship, and even though we lived completely separate lives, and still do something called the Bald Explorer. And the funny thing is, of course, everybody assumes that we are partners and things, which we're not. But it's a myth that I'm quite happy for that to go, because it's just quite nice, really. I think having an air of mystery about you is quite good.
In your career, you have obviously started off at some point, but did you have anything or anybody that influenced the way that you started doing your videos?
Nice one, Kevin. Thanks for that. Yeah, the thing that got me into filmmaking to begin with, I've always been interested in the performing arts and stuff, theatre and stuff. But the thing that really got me into filmmaking, and I really don't know what would have happened if this had not happened in my life. Where I lived, there was a derelict farm very close to the back of my house in Horsham in West Sussex. And one day my mate, we were, 14? Me and my mate were playing in the derelict farmland, and we noticed this car pull up. And the farm had been derelict for a while, but before it had been derelict, there was the old farmer, and he wasn't too keen with us playing in his fields and in the hedgerows, so we always used to duck and keep out of the way. And the farm had been derelict, like I say, and then one day this Ford Capri came up and drove up, and these two blokes got out, but they leapt out, rolled on the floor, and pointed guns towards somebody we couldn't see in the farm. Well, we hid, and we were absolutely astonished by this, because nothing like this had ever happened. But they got back in the car, they reversed the car up, and then repeated this again, leapt out and pointed guns. Well, we were a bit inquisitive, and we crept up only to discover there was a film crew there making a film. And we watched them make this film, and it turns out it was a stunt film. It was a sort of promotional film to show how this stunt crew could fall off roofs, could shoot one another, fight, set fire to a building, all this sort of business, which then they presumably sold themselves to the industry, and they'd used the derelict farm as a location. And it was that, watching those guys work, and there's a much longer story about this, I'll tell that on another occasion, but watching those guys work really inspired me. And we went back to the farm, my friend and I, and using my dad's SLR, not a DSLR, but a single lens reflex, just an ordinary camera, a Zenith I think it was, we put in a slide film, and we made a slide film of this event as much as we could, get clambering on the roofs and all of that. And as a result, I was bitten by the bug in terms of making films, and the rest I just pretty much picked up myself. There was no one person that influenced me. I was just passionate about telling stories in some form or other using the medium of film.
I have a question for you. I wondered, once we're all back to normal and you're allowed out again, where's the first place that you're going to go and visit, and why?
The first place, well, I have no particular idea of where I would go, but I think it would be somewhere where I can get in the car for an hour or so and actually drive out of Sussex. Maybe the first place I go to is actually out of Sussex altogether, and certainly not in this region, just to have that sense of freedom again once this lockdown is over. It's just that sense of being able to, because I've been having to pussyfoot around in the locality and desperately try and find interesting things, whereas before the lockdown we were going all sorts of places. In fact, just before the lockdown started, the lovely Julia and I were in Hampshire intending to go around the hangars and have a look at that, but sadly we couldn't do that, and we had to come back. So I think what would be the sort of thing I would want to do is to celebrate the freedom, is to go away, spend a few days exploring somewhere completely different to here.
What's your favourite piece of kit as a filmmaker?
My favourite bit of kit is going to be an unusual one, because most people would think you're talking about a camera or a microphone or something snazzy. But the one bit of kit that I absolutely love, and I very rarely use it these days, I used to use it all the time in my corporate work, but I don't with all the lightweight cameras and things, and that is my proper tripod. It's a big hefty tripod. It's unpractical to carry around on my walks and things like that, because it's quite heavy. But what I love about it is the fact that with the bigger cameras that I was using back when I was doing the corporate stuff, the camera would slot in it very quickly. You could level the camera very easily, had a lovely fluid head so that you could get wonderful pans, and you would be nice and stable. You could fit a jib arm to it as well, so that you could get sort of mini crane effects, movement and stuff. It's an absolutely wonderful bit of kit. I bought it probably in I don't know, about 2000, somewhere like that, turn of the millennium, and it was about 250 quid. I think it's more like 750 quid now. The same tripod. It's made of metal, it's long lasting, there's not much that can go wrong with it. It's a beautiful bit of kit. It's just very heavy and impractical to do on my main walks. But when I get back into some more longer format filmmaking, which is I really want to do at some point, I'm going to be reusing it, and I shall be looking forward to it. Very good question, thanks Mark.
I've got a question for you. How many kids' books have you written? I know you've written some. How many have you written, and how long did they take?
I started writing children's books when I got fed up with not getting anywhere. I'd made my long format Bald Explorers, and they weren't really being picked up. People weren't seeming to be interested. Some of the long format ones now have got horrific numbers of viewers. But at the time, because they were taking so long to produce and make, I got very disillusioned, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go back to children's storytelling, which I had been doing with my kids' TV series and pitches that I'd been putting together. And so I started to write, and I'd had this book in mind, this little silly fantasy story called Splidge the Crag Flinger, which is a bit of a mouthful now. And I wrote this book some time ago, and then I kept writing it, and now it is published. I think it's probably too wordy, too long, probably needs editing down, but it was an amazing experience to sit and write. How many books, you ask? I'm not quite sure, actually, because that was a trilogy. I wrote all 3 books for that. I started another book called The Ghost Detective, and there's 2 books on that which I've written. I've got a number of books in embryonic form, which are either first draft or almost finished first draft or plots for them. So, you know, I guess about 8 or 9 books. I love telling stories. I love dreaming up crazy ideas and then trying to put that into words. I never felt that I was good enough, and that my learning English was something that would take time. But you only learn by doing. So the only reason I stopped writing children's books is because in 2017 I started this 10-minute videos that went out every day as a break, really, because I had again got disillusioned because nobody was buying the books. It was very hard, no publisher was interested, and actually the more I researched into it, I discovered that writers generally don't make any money writing. You're very, very lucky if you earn a living from writing, and it was taking me all day. So a good question. I would love to get back into it, but I just find I don't have enough time. And making these videos is pretty much now my full-time occupation.
Well, thank you very much for that, Richard. It's been very enlightening, and I'm sure everyone at home has been asking these questions. I also should thank everybody in the senior management team for sending in their questions for this video. Now, if anybody else out there has any questions they want to ask Richard, just leave it in the comments. But don't forget to like and subscribe and become part of the Bald Explorer group. Please take care, and I'll see you again next time.